Let's talk about the two most common edits, which is insert and overwrite. Now, these aren't just the most common, they're very powerful as well. And understanding how these work will make a big difference in how they affect the clips down in your sequence once your movie is being built. Now, up to this point, you have been performing insert edits, right? I mean, technically an insert edit can be something as simple as clicking on a clip in your source and dragging it down to your sequence, or from your project tab and dragging that clip down into your sequence. That in both of those are insert edits. But what I want to talk to you about, though, is how to utilize the automated feature for insert and overwrite, and how these work into that, meaning the source panel and how it's patched over to what I'll call the target track. Okay, so as an example, I have a clip loaded into my source window, right? I want to click on the shortcut, which is the insert edit. When I click on that, watch what happens to my sequence. Do you see that? It sent the clip down to where the playhead was, and it moved everything over to the right in track 1. That's because my source was set to the target track, which is V1. Let me undo that, right? Command Z on a Mac and Control Z on a PC to undo. If I move this up, this is my source. Now remember, this represents whatever's in my source window. That's the video part. I'm going to put this on the 3rd layer, and I'll move the audio down to the 3rd and 4th layer, right? And I'll do the exact same thing. I'll click on this insert button, boom. It sent that down where the playhead was, but it put the video on the 3rd track, which is what I wanted it to do because I have this set or targeted to the 3rd layer, and that sent the audio down to A3 and A4. So very powerful in where the placement is and the track that it gets placed on. So let's undo that again. Now I want to show you a different way of doing this, which is, I would call this an automated way as well. If I mouse click and drag this over to my program window, I get this option here, overwrite and or insert. If I hold the command key down on my Mac, I get the insert option. On a PC, it's the control key. And when I let this go now, it did the exact same thing. It did the insert edit. It moved everything over to the right, like a wedge in a tree that's being hit into a tree trunk. It just splits everything and moves it over. That's exactly what we just did. So let me undo that. And I don't know if you saw, of course, the overwrite is there. I don't have to push any button to get the overwrite option when I drag the clip from the source to my program. And when I let that go, I just did an overwrite edit. Now, what is that? How does that work? An overwrite edit simply covers the clip and doesn't move anything over, right? It's simply almost like a blanket on a bed, basically. It still did the same as far as placement is concerned, right? It put the clip where my playhead was, and it sent it to the 3rd track. Now, the difference here, though, now remember, the top layer takes precedence. I'll only see this top layer. But the audio, I will hear 4 tracks of audio. Big difference in the audible way of how that worked. That was the overwrite edit. Let me undo it, and I'll do the same thing by clicking on this button here. That's the overwrite, and boom, it sent it down to that layer. So the insert edit and the overwrite edit obviously do different things to your sequence, and when you have clips down in the sequence, it really makes a difference visually and audibly what happens and how it affects those clips down below. You may not grasp this at first. You may not even use it for a while, but knowing how it works and how it is affected by selecting over here your source and what I'll call the target track makes a big difference when you want to speed things up and quickly move through the edit. Let me show you something else. So I'm going to undo this, and I'm going to bring this back down. I'll bring the video back down to V1, bring the audio back up to A1 and A2. And what if I wanted to simply drag this down to my sequence and perform, let's say, an insert edit? Okay, let's try that. If I mouse click on this clip in my source window and drag it down, if I were to let it go right now, I would perform an overwrite edit, right? I don't have to do anything to do that. But if I hold the command key down on my keyboard, I'm on a Mac. If you're on a PC, hold the control key down, you'll see those little arrows pointing to the right. If I were to let everything go, which is what I'll do right now, boom, I just performed an insert edit. Let's try it again. Mouse click, drag, hold the command key down on a Mac, control key on a PC, let it go. I just performed an insert edit. Now I'm going to undo that again. To perform an overwrite edit, I don't have to hold any key down. All I have to do is drag. So I can mouse click and drag, boom, put that right there. And it didn't move anything over. It's simply covering the visual part, and the audio part, I'll only hear one audio track. Now I'll undo that and let's try this one more time. If I want, I can do this. I can drag this down and park it on the above track for visual and audio on below tracks. And now I'll hear 4 tracks of audio, but I'll still only see 1 track of video. So those are the differences between an insert and an override edit, and how they are affected depending on whether you use the automated way or you manually drag your clips down. And don't forget how these work when you do the automated way for the insert edit and the override edit as well. And again, this is something that I hope you'll utilize sooner rather than later, because I know you'll appreciate these at some point as you progress in your editing and your knowledge of Premiere Pro.